So, two massive things happened basically at the same time this week. And the timing of it is the kind of thing that makes your brain start running in directions it probably shouldn't. But let's just lay out what exactly happened and let people decide what to do with it. On one hand, the US and Israel launched coordinated joint attacks on Iran starting February 28th, which is not a small thing. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, was killed in airstrikes targeting his office in Tehran. The Natanz nuclear facility was struck. Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. Over 500 ballistic missiles and 2,000 drones were launched in retaliation. US soldiers are dead. The stock market is tanking. Asian stocks fell sharply with a record sell-off in sale. This is genuinely one of the biggest geopolitical events in years, and it is actively unfolding right now. And on the other hand, while all of that was dominating every headline and every news cycle and every conversation, the Department of Justice removed nearly 48,000 files from the publicly available database of Jeffrey Epstein case files. Just gone. And not quietly either. People noticed. And when they noticed, the DOJ's response was essentially, don't worry about it. Now, I want to be careful here because there are two very different things happening that are getting blended together online. There's the conspiracy framing, which is that the war was started on purpose to distract from the files. And then there's the documented, verified, reported on by multiple outlets reality of what was actually removed and why it matters. Those are not the same conversation, and I think it's worth separating them. The documented reality is this. An NPR investigation found the Justice Department withheld some Epstein files related to allegations that President Trump sexually abused a minor. It also removed some documents from the public database where accusations against Epstein also mention Trump. That's not a rumor. That's NPR after reviewing serial numbers, document logs, and FBI case records. The FBI interviewed this Trump and Epstein accuser 4 times, according to an FBI serial report and a list of non-testifying witness material in the Maxwell case. The Justice Department said it was looking into whether it had improperly withheld documents after several news organizations reported that some records involving uncorroborated accusations made by a woman against President Trump were not among those released to the public. That's the DOJ essentially acknowledging the problem after getting caught. Rep. Robert Garcia, a Democrat from California, said he personally went to the DOJ to look for the documents and they were missing, and that there was no legal argument for why they hadn't been released. And the DOJ's explanation for why so many files were pulled? A DOJ spokesperson said they have not deleted any files from the library and that the files will be available after redactions are made, which is a very specific and very careful way of saying we took them down, but we didn't delete them. Cool. Extremely reassuring. The DOJ missed a deadline to make public all the documents in its possession. Files containing allegations against President Trump were withheld from the public. And some lawmakers who actually went in and reviewed the unredacted files say the withheld information didn't even meet the criteria the DOJ claimed justified keeping it hidden. Here's the part that I think is actually the most important and gets glossed over in all the noise. This wasn't supposed to be a mystery. The Justice Department was forced by law to release most of its files related to the late sex offender. There's literally an enacted piece of legislation called the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and the DOJ still found ways to not fully comply with it. That's the thing that should be making more people uncomfortable. It's not just about what's in the files, it's about the fact that a law was passed, the law was not followed, and the specific files that weren't followed happened to involve the sitting president. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee said the withholding is a potential crime. That's a strong word to use, and look, politicians say dramatic things all the time, but when you have members of Congress walking into the DOJ themselves to physically check for documents and coming out saying they're not there, that goes a little beyond typical political theater. Now back to the Iran situation, because that part is also a complete mess in its own right. Trump and his administration have not been aligned on their own narrative, with the stated justification for the attacks shifting between preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, regime change, stopping an imminent attack, on U.S. interests and following Israel's lead. A Democrat senator who came out a classified briefing told reporters he had no idea what the objective was, which is a sentence that should probably alarm people more than it seems to be. The UN nuclear watchdog told CNN that Iran was not days or weeks away from having atomic weapons, directly countering the official US justification for the strikes. So the reason that was publicly given for starting a war was disputed by an independent international body almost immediately. And I want to be clear again, I'm not saying the war was manufactured to hide the files. That's an extraordinary claim that requires extraordinary evidence, and the evidence for that specific claim doesn't exist. What I'm saying is that two genuinely serious things happen at the exact same time. One of them is being covered wall to wall, and the other one involves a sitting US president and a federal law being potentially broken, and it's getting a fraction of the attention. The investigative reporter who originally broke the Epstein story years ago said this case is still an example of how there are two systems of justice in this country. One for people who have money and power, and one for everyone else. And whatever you think about the politics of all this, that observation is hard to argue with when you can watch in real time as relevant documents get quietly pulled while the whole world is looking somewhere else. Nobody needs to believe in a grand conspiracy for this to be worth paying attention to. Sometimes the most unsettling thing isn't a secret plan. It's just watching powerful institutions do whatever they want and betting that everyone will be too distracted to notice.